Our next session is the 30-year history of California's waste tire program. It is my pleasure to introduce my coworker for the last 30 years, Nate Gauff. He's worked at CalRecycle for 33 years and has spent the last 29 years focusing on tire recycling issues. His primary area of responsibility has been rubberized asphalt concrete, tire recycling methods and process, and the tire-derived fuel. Has been instrumental in developing and implementing CalRecycle's RAC program strategies and activities. In addition to managing over $20 million in RAC grants to local governments, he has managed over $20 million in RAC-related contracts with with Caltrans, state agencies, local governments, and private contractors. Please welcome Nate Gauff.
Thank you, Sally. Full disclosure, I'm going to try not to put you all to sleep with this history presentation. What I want to do is just kind of hit some of the highlights, what I see as the highlights from our program, mainly in the development. I'm going to talk more about the early years and talk about how the program was set up, some of the things we tried, look at some of the numbers, some of the results. And I have a few things, considerations to leave you guys with as we progress through this tire conference. The other thing is I want you all to know 30 years, and this actually goes back to the beginning of the program in 1989. And if the few of you that were maybe around at that time remember, we were also in the midst of the AB 939 waste management hierarchy process at the Waste Management Board at that time, now CalRecycle. So, we had these parallel major efforts going on. Tires hadn't been dealt with that much up to that point. And the solid waste management with the new hierarchy, looking at the 25% recycling by 95 and 50% by 2000, it was a time of vast growth of the agency, number one, and looking at how to manage these materials, not only solid waste in general, but looking at tires in specific, how to manage these in a responsible way. So that's what I'm going to cover. In the beginning, AB 1843 was enabling legislation by Speaker Willie Brown at the time. SB 937 was also some legislation that partnered with 1843 to help implement this program. Basically, the things that it required is establish the tire recycling fund. And it was a quarter a tire at disposals. Now you got to understand that didn't mean we got a quarter for every tire. That meant we got a quarter for every tire that was actually disposed of at a facility or at a dealership or a tire shop. So a lot of people would take their tires and go home and let them store up in the garage and those types of things. So we didn't get that money, but it did generate about $3.5 million at that time. That was the fund that we used to fund the whole program. Now that includes the management side, on the enforcement side, and market development. It also established a 25% diversion goal within the first 4 years, and that's 25% diversion from landfills for tires. Obviously, it paralleled the waste management hierarchy with a tire management hierarchy. Now, most people don't remember that, but it was there to also develop not only control and enforcement of the tire piles and tire management, tire flows, but also to do the market development side. And it established our permitting system for tires. So in the beginning, this is what we were looking at in the sense of tires, about 27 million generated, 4 million going to tire-derived fuel. Primarily, that was going to MELP, Modesto Energy Limited Partnership, for those of you that remember. And if you don't, I'll show you a picture in a minute. That was about 3 of the 4 million tires were going to MELP, about 1 million were going to cement kilns. And of that million, I believe most of those were imported. Retreads obviously are there, exports. Now, when I say exports, those are mostly tires that were going to Mexico at that time. And then we had the reused. And if you look at the bottom, the other recycling, rubberized asphalt, tire-derived products. I don't think there was any civil engineering for the most part at that point. That's where we were. We were real low on the market development side, as you can see. There's melt. For those of you who don't remember, I think if I do this right, this is the actual facility up here that burned the tires, generated about 14 megawatts of electricity. They did have a subsidized electrical rate, so that's why they were viable economically. But you can also see here's the fuel for melt, all these tires down there. And that's probably a picture of when it wasn't as expansive as it ended up being. This was the other thing we had around the state. We did have stockpiles. This is also melt, but I just wanted to give you a representation of, we did have a number of stockpiles around the state. It was estimated in 1990, we had anywhere from 20 to 35 million tires in stockpiles in California. Okay, so what did we do early on? First thing we had to do was get organized from an agency standpoint. So AB 1843 enabled us to have a staff of 9 in the program. And once again, that covered both sides, market development and enforcement, and tire management. It also helped this started the regulation development process for the tire facilities, which resulted in some emergency regs that were adopted in February of '92. The first thing we did on the market development side was we did a $500,000 interagency agreement with Caltrans to buy some equipment for them to do testing in leading to rubberized asphalt specifications. So that was the first effort. We actually bought their first dynamic shear rheometer, for those that know Caltrans. We also bought the first universal testing machine that was used to help, once again, test the pavement materials. We also started on the development of our first grant criteria, which I'll talk a little bit about the grant programs. And once again, aside from the tire facility regulations, which was more about the logistics of the tire facility itself, sizing, fire lanes, that type of thing, we also started the development of our tire facility permitting process. So the next year, basically, we did our major work at that time, which was the tires as a fuel supplement feasibility report, and that really looked at, and that actually was done in conjunction with Air Resources Board, but we looked at the technical and environmental aspects of the different tire recycling uses that we were aware of at that time. So we looked at rubberized asphalt, tire-derived fuel, molded products or making products. We looked at some of the civil engineering that was emerging at that time. And so looking at those, we chose basically rubberized asphalt and tire-derived fuel had the most near-term benefit to us managing our tires. Once again, you got to understand the time we're looking at 20 to 35 million tire stockpile. The other things we did early on, we did our first effort on pile identification, once again, cataloging these various tire piles, legal and illegal, around the state, and also quantifying and getting a better handle and refining that number of the 20 to 35 million. And we started some small remediation efforts on some of these piles that have been abandoned. We also issued our first tire recycling grants. They were in those 3 categories mentioned. And once again, we were trying to look at the varying aspects of how we could effectively handle the market development side of things. So some of it was with local government, and some of those were, Amnesty Day projects and stuff like that. We also recognized that we need to do some business development. We didn't have very many tire businesses at that time, especially on the market development side or the reuse side. And we did a number of research projects. And Sally wanted me to, list some of those, and I can't remember, but they were varied. Let me put it that way, is a nice way of saying We did a lot of weird things what may have seemed weird at the time, but you got to understand it was a wide open, it was the wild, wild west at that point. There was basically nothing was known. And the good thing is most of those grants did teach us something, whether they proved out to be something that we followed up on or that became more beneficial as far as helping us recycle tires, or for us to learn to say, no, let's not pursue that because that's not going to work. So they were beneficial. And the other thing we did a second interagency agreement with Caltrans for $500,000 to actually field test 16 different rubberized asphalt strategies near Woodland, California on a highway. So we got a common field demonstration of these materials, how these materials perform side by side. The other thing I will tell you, since I was involved in the program from the beginning, and I've been involved with rubberized asphalt a lot, I do call out all the rubberized asphalt projects we did over the time, just because that I wrote the presentation and I'm up here doing it. Okay, so some of the grants, like I said, business development, we were looking for grants for applied research, technical validation, and also helping businesses with their marketing and business plan development. And when I say applied research, this was taking things that were more proven and trying to take them to a commercialization stage. That was the focus of those grants. The research were more looking at, like I said, it was wide open. What's out there? What can we do? What can we try? So it was once again, it was pretty wild, some of the things we attempted. And like I said, but it was good for us to learn what worked and what didn't. And then the local government innovation side of it, once again, it was the start of our long history of partnering with local governments on looking at various things, whether it be cleanup, local projects. We did some rubberized asphalt projects, even with that back then with some of the local governments, and also helping them try to recruit these businesses to their jurisdiction. Also on the grants, like I said, they were very diverse in nature. We did try to promote, and we've always from the very beginning promoted and tried to develop tire to our products. Those are some of the projects that we tried. We also did looked at a number of projects that were aimed at pyrolysis and developing pyrolysis way back then. Unfortunately, none of them panned out at the time, but once again, did increase our knowledge base on the technology. We also did several projects for tire processing technologies, and that included things like chrome rubber, tire shredding, looking at civil engineering, and those type of the technologies to make the materials that we could use in some of the products and some of the other applications. Initially, we had 20 grants. This is the first year that we awarded grants. We had 20 grants when it was just under $1 million. We also did, in addition to grants, we also had contracts, which were direct agreements with local government agencies. Like I said, once again, these were very diverse projects. We did have some pavement grants. The Earthship project, for any of you that remember Earthships, we did offer contracts for that. Unfortunately, our Earthship never got built. We had some sound wall prototypes. I know you guys are from the European guys, right? I'm sorry, I'm not. Norway and Sweden, right? Yes. Oh, Norway, Sweden. Okay. And I heard we had a meeting yesterday with them, and one of the things they talked about was when the sound wall or highway noise barriers and that type of thing. And we tried a couple of those projects early on. I think they do have some promise, and we can talk about that later offline. But anyway, we did 8 contracts at the time, totaled about $500,000. And then, like I said, with the local government innovations program, that was once again aimed at helping local governments and some of their issues at the time, which were mainly tire amnesty. Education was another big thing we were trying to accomplish, and then recruiting businesses and that type of thing. Okay, so the next year, SB 744 was enacted, and that enabled the hauler program. For those of you that are involved in the hauler program, this is where you started. We also had our first tire recycling conference in April of '93. Once again, gathering folks such as yourselves to talk about what we can do to drive our tire program forward, and also to listen to industry and see their concerns and how we might be able to help. We did our first market status report, which once again looked at some of or compiled some of the learnings that we had gotten up to this point. And we refined some of the study that we have done earlier from the Tires as Fuel report. And so we were looking more at the whole market quantification, where we need to go, that type of thing. We were trying to plan that process out even back at the beginning. We did our second round of tire grants, which was about $1 million. Next thing we did, or the next thing that came up the next year was about the volume reduction of tires for, that basically meant you couldn't landfill whole tires anymore. That started way back in '94. We did the next report, which was once again a follow on to the Tires as Fuel report, which was environmental factors of waste tire pyrolysis, gasification, liquefaction. So we took the pyrolysis information that we did initially, and we had somebody look further into the technology. That report once again gave us some information on how we were going to approach that technology in the future. The waste tire hauler program did actually start the next year. We did our next round of tire grants, 1.4 million, and we started our remediation stabilization program. Once again, you got to understand, we were adding staff and trying to add pieces to the puzzle during all this time. Next year, we did our second tire recycling conference, was here in Sacramento. Did another round of grants. We did actually it was our second loan. The first loan was to Tygon for $500,000 to do chrome rubber, and that didn't work out real well, so I didn't mention it, but I just did. So sorry. But we did another loan to Parco Recycling for looking at chrome rubber manufacturing. At the time, around that time, I think the only company that was doing chrome rubber in the state was Atlas Rubber in Los Angeles. The one thing we did do, and I wanted to shout out to Sac State, in this year, we did contract with you guys for the first time to do some of our chrome rubber workshops. And subsequently, you got the contracts to do these tire conferences, and I think they do a great job. So I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, 1996, next year we went to AB 2108, which actually moved our tire fee from the back end to the front end. And what that did is that added about another $1 million, almost $2 million to the program, because once again, that now we were getting all the tires that were bought and sold, whether you left your tire with the dealer or not, didn't matter. You paid for it up front. It was still a quarter tire. So, we, like I said, we were in the $5 to $6 million range, I think, for the entire tire fund at that time. We also contracted, or actually produced a report on looking at waste tires, of tire facilities and their effects on the environment. That was done by Lawrence Livermore National Labs. That was actually maybe a fuller, understanding of the environmental effects of all the tire processing or tire uses at the time. So that was an expansion upon the work that staff did for the Tires as Fuel supplement report. But we got a better look at some of the environmental ramifications of tire facilities and tire processing. We added some new grant programs, playground cover grants. We actually, and I think this is because of the increased funding, we also looked at specific grants for Amnesty Day and local enforcement grants, looking at giving local agencies money to do local enforcement for tire management. So that was one good thing about expanding the fund, is that we were able to actually expand our programs. Next, we also did another report on emissions from TDF, and that was done by Dames and Moore. We did our first local government cleanup matching grants, and we actually started our first rubberized asphalt technical support contract. At that time, it was with Los Angeles County, and using their staff as our liaison to local agencies, mainly in Southern California, to expand the use of rubberized asphalt at the local level. Okay, next year. Third Tire Conference, Santa Clara. So you guys see the theme. We actually have been trying to gather you folks together and help us expand and make our program more useful. But we also had some problems. We had the first major tire fire was the Royster tire fire. That burned for, I think, 9 months. I don't know if anybody wants to correct me on that, but I think it was about 9 months before that fire was extinguished. We put together this California Waste Tire Program evaluation and recommendations. That was partly in response to the tire fire, and it was also an evaluation of what we had done up to that point in our tire program. And it also laid out a lot of recommendations for how we thought we could improve the program. That was actually, if you look at that, it was actually required by AB 117, which was Assembly Member Escudia. It also was partly in response to extending the tire fee. That's why we had to do the evaluation, because at the time the tire fee was getting close to sunset. Right after that, we actually did that or issued that report in June, and in September we had another tire fire, Wesley. So this is the Tracy pile. That's what it looked like at one time. One was burning, and like I said, it was 9 months to extinguish that one. Then we had the Wesley fire, and these were, like I said, about 1.5 years apart. I think we learned from Wesley. If anybody's here who can correct me, we put that fire out in 3 months, something like that. Okay, so we didn't let it burn as long. We went in and attacked it, and it still made a mess, but we did go after that one a little better. So the end of the beginning. When I say the end of the beginning, this is the end of the first 10 years. Is partly in response to the AB 117 report. The Waste Management Board actually formed the Special Waste Division. So what that did is that coalesced the folks working in enforcement and the folks working in market development and some of the other folks that were involved in the tire program that were scattered throughout the board. It basically put us all in one group, in one division within the Waste Management Board. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so the other thing was Milk closed. Well, Milk closed for a couple of reasons. One, their subsidized electrical rate went away around that time. Two, a lot of their tires burned up, so they didn't have feedstock, and it was a mess because the tires were on fire. It was hard for them to get tires to the facility to actually for the controlled burning part of it, and so ultimately they closed. But on the good side, what we did, we also started our first civil engineering technical assistance contract work. At that time, I think it was Dr. Dana Humphreys. But once again, this was to build upon our civil engineering, growing civil engineering use that we were looking at and formalize the technical assistance to agencies, to local agencies. We had additional grant programs that we added. LEA, local enforcement grants, tire cleanup and amnesty, and education. Once again, these all became separate programs versus being grouped in kind of a general lump. The one thing at the end of this first decade, I want to state, we did have the largest state program in the sense of how many tires we used or consumed. But we also had the lowest fee in the nation, or one of the lowest fees. So we were able to do a lot of this on a limited budget. The tire fires, though, did bring about, before I get to that. Okay, so in the second decade, this is where we ended up. The column with no number above it is the 2020 numbers. I mean, the 2000 numbers. So you can see we made improvements in TDF, but we made big improvements in other recycling. And that's the thing I want to call out. We did a better job of developing some of these uses that actually helped us to consume tires, which also helped us to become the largest state program in the nation. I mean, obviously we're a big state and we have more tires, but we also had the largest program for actually finding uses for the tires at that point. So the second decade started with SB 876, which is also Escudia. And you can see now she moved from the assembly side of our legislature to the Senate side. But a lot of good things happened out of that bill. One, it increased our fee to $1 a tire. And it also included tires on new motor vehicles, which had been excluded previously. What that did is that bumped us up to, I don't know, $25–30 million a year in funding. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was quite a bump. Let's put it that way. But it also mandated us to spend $6.5 million a year on tire enforcement, mainly because we wanted to clean up the tire piles. Oh, let me go back one. On this number, I failed to mention around 2000, our stockpiles were down to less than 2 million statewide. Now, most of those burned up, and most of that original 20 million burned up in the 2 tire fires, but we were down to 2 million other stockpiles. So we had made some inroads in addition to the tire fires. We had made some inroads about tire illegal piles and that type of thing. And that's why the $6.5 million was earmarked to actually alleviate the rest of that. We changed it. Also, the legislation also changed the definition of waste tire, used tire, some of that tire dart product, made tweaks to the hauler manifest and facility permitting regulations programs. Okay. It also requires us to do our 5-year tire planning process, which we're going to be doing for the 12th time, 11th time at the end of this month, for those of you that are interested. It required some new and revised tire regs. Once again, expanded the scope of the local enforcement tire grants and required Caltrans and ARB to annually report to the legislature about their tire uses. So started the second decade. That's what we did. We did our first 5-year tire plan. We did this Dixon Landing project, which was a tire derived aggregate shreds. And I wanted to let you're from Toxics, right? Okay, so tire derived aggregate is tire chips, 3 to 8 inches, 12 inches. It's actually not used in rubberized asphalt at all, just because of the size of the material. But anyway, we did a project there for a lightweight fill project, used 660,000 tires. And that is still, I think, the single largest tire use project in the state, or in the history of our program. We also did energy recovery grants for about $1 million. And actually that was for 2 years. That was 0102, 02, 03. So it was two fiscal years. Total of those 2 fiscal years was only $1 million. We did an incentives and subsidy study, for those that remember that. And, once again, our various tire grants continued, but once again, we expanded because we had more money. We went to tire commercialization, about $2 million. Track and surfacing became a dedicated program, $1 million. Playgrounds, another almost $1 million. So later on, a couple of years later, AB 1756 came up, which was a prohibition on us supporting anything in relation to incineration of tires. So there went the tire energy grants. It also ended up being, there went pyrolysis. Anything that was thermally related basically got lumped into that, and we can no longer support it. Also, later toward 2004-05, we did an overhaul of our waste tire manifest system. In 2003, we did our first dedicated rubberized asphalt concrete grants, and that was through Senator Kuehl's Senate Bill 1346 program. We did our first private industry rubberized asphalt technical assistance contract. Like I said, up to that point, we have been utilizing public employees through LA County, and then we added Sacramento County in 2000. We switched from that to going to private industry technical assistance folks, and we've been doing that ever since. We also did we did a report on devulcanization technologies. Later on, and this is after 2005, which we did the AB 338 was enacted, which required Caltrans or mandated the use of rubberized asphalt by Caltrans, and that's still in effect today. We expanded the grant programs for rubberized asphalt significantly. We basically tripled the amount of money that we were putting into rubberized asphalt grants. We did a second tire pyrolysis report. That was done through UC Riverside. And then the other part of it, we continue all of our grant programs. We continue the civil engineering aspects. I mean, the technical assistance aspects. We also tried a couple of new things. We tried an outreach campaign for rubberized asphalt and tire-derived products. And that was, we hired a PR firm to actually go out and set up meetings. In the case of rubberized asphalt, we set up meetings with local decision makers at the local level to get them to understand the benefits of using rubberized asphalt, the cost effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that program was moderately successful. But we also did a similar type of campaign looking at tire-derived products. The other thing is in 2008, the Special Waste Division was disbanded. And so we were scattered far and abroad back into the Waste Management Board structure at that time. So now I'm getting to 2010. These are our use numbers. As you can see, there was a significant bump in the number of tires generated. And across all categories, except for now you see the recycling, other recycling went down a few million tires. And that was, you know, for various reasons, but I don't want to get into all those right now. But otherwise, our tire number is increasing. Our tire recycling or diversion is also increasing for the most part. So the last decade, and I'm going to wrap this up. This is quick. Last decade has been a maintenance of basically the last half of, since about 2006, 7. We've been doing basically the same things: grant programs, technical assistance. We've been doing less research on new processes or new technologies. Exports we've increased, or exports increased pretty much, mainly for tire-derived fuel, but it's also hurt some of the diversion numbers. And we became a department in 2010. So we've had management changes and programmatic changes, management changes within the program over that time. So here's a wrap up of where we are today. You can see once again, the total number of tires generated has really bumped up. And overall, our numbers have decreased slightly, mainly in TDF and also in other recycling for the most part. The one thing I do want to say, once again, I try to keep these numbers consistent, and it's not the same as in the tire market report. The exports I'm mainly listing here are ones that are exported mainly to Mexico and outside the state, not overseas for fuel and that type of thing. I just want you to understand that. Okay, so wrapping it up, what I wanted to say is, you know, this is what we've given out in grants that I could total. I may be off by a few million or 10 million or something like that. But if you look at it, we've given out $230 million in grants over the history of this program. Almost half of it's actually been for pavement grants, which is my program. I'm happy for that. I've had a lot of successes with agencies. Working with Caltrans has been good. We've had a pretty successful program, but we've also promoted tire-derived products. You know, we're now in the tire incentive program, and the other things are more on the enforcement side. But at the bottom, if you look at, we've done little with civil engineering and little with tire-derived fuel. And tire-derived fuel has probably diverted more tires from landfill disposal over the history of this program than any other use. And we've spent basically nothing. I just wanted to bring that out, not to say it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying, understand there are certain dynamics on all of these uses. And tire-derived fuel has just been one that's been beneficial in diverting tires, but we haven't had to spend a lot to support it. So anyway, a couple of considerations I want folks to leave you with on this history and as we progress through the conference. You know, tire budgets historically been split 50-50 between enforcement and market development. Is that time for a change? Do we need to spend more? I think we've done a great job cleaning up our piles, managing our tires. We have a good management system. Hauler manifest, we're going to electronic manifest system. You know, we've done a good job on the enforcement side. Do we need to shift some of that budget to the market development side to try to push the market development numbers, which I know some, you know, Maureen talked about, you know, circular economy. How do we effectively do that? And it may need to be time to look at how we split our money. Whoops. How do we continue to use grants to stimulate markets? That's a big question. Maybe some of you out there have some answers. But that's something we need to consider. And can we partner with tire manufacturers, which I think Michael told me, no, we can't at this point, just because of the nature of how they approach trade issues and the competitive nature of their industry. But we need to look at some partnerships to how we try to accomplish in a sense, some of their work. I'll lack of a better term, because we're the state, we're the ones responsible for managing these tires. So that's just some considerations I want to leave with you all. And ask you, where do we go in the next 30 years? That's for you guys to answer. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Nate. We have time for just probably one or two questions. Do we have anyone that has a question?
Kieran Mitchell from Caribou Biofuels. Consider there's a process that can break tires down chemically to the raw components, and you can reuse them to build brand new tires. But if that's a thermal process, from what I understand through AB 1756, that's prohibited because of that law. So if there's an ideal scientific process, what steps are CalRecycle taking so that you can evaluate the process itself, not be restricted by a blanket law?
Well, I'll say as far as us reviewing the process, it's not an issue, expending staff time to look at that. We just can't support that process monetarily through our tire funds. That's it. We've looked at a lot of pyrolysis, gasification technologies over the years since AB 1756 has been enacted. But once again, we will not be able to support it financially. Thanks. I know I ran over time. I'm sorry about that.
I have a question. Chuck Smith. I noticed the figures on exporting of tires to different places. With the concept of electrification of transportation systems, would there not also be an opportunity to divert some of that export to the production of the energy necessary to ramp up the electrification?
I'm not sure if I fully understand your question.
Rather than export the tires, process them in California.
Oh, sure. There's always been that opportunity. And we're welcome. We welcome the opportunity to talk with anybody that would look, anytime we can divert tires that are leaving or that are being landfilled into productive use. That's what we're here for. So we're willing to talk to you and discuss that at any time.
Okay, let's go give a big round of applause for Nate Gauff and his great presentation.